Lori was here this morning, she would tell you that growing up, every once in a while, they would be called to a family meeting. And they would be asked to join in the living room, and they always knew what that meant. And that announcement was usually met with a little bit of dread and uncertainty, because it meant that there was a major decision in the offing, and the move was more than likely. We finished our journey through the story last week, but this morning I want to talk about a new journey. And I've got a box of Kleenex up here. I know I'm going to need it, and if any of you need it, feel free to come and grab one. I'll grab a couple just in case. Just over 5 years ago, you invited me to be your pastor and invited my family and I to join you at this church. And it's been an amazing 5 years. But as we know, in the last year we've lost a number of people to death. As we also know, there are a number of folks who have moved away or are soon to move away. And so I have come to the decision, along with the ministerial review team that's composed of Don Thomas and Morris Bowen, who's there in the back, George Chapman, and Al Pascal, and Gary Good. We mutually came to the decision that this church can no longer afford to support a full-time pastor. And we've known that this day was likely to come for a number of years. In fact, even 5 or so years ago when you called me to be your pastor, you knew that it wasn't going to be easy to support a full-time minister, and you took the step of faith to try to continue supporting a full-time minister and invited me to come. I thought about pulling out the first sermon I preached here and reading a few of the things I shared with you that first Sunday when I essentially interviewed here with you. Maybe I'll do that on my last Sunday. But we've come a long ways as a church. And a lot of wonderful things have happened in the last 5 years, in your lives and in mine. And yes, there probably are regrets. There probably are things that I wish I had done differently. There certainly are things I'm sure you wish I had done differently. But here we are. And so we mutually agreed on Friday evening, after several months of discussions off and on, that not only does Rockland need to shift to having a part-time pastor, but that I can't be that part-time pastor. And there are a number of reasons for that. One is that I've spent the last couple years looking for part-time work that would complement my role here as a pastor, and I've not been able to find anything. Another is that right now I already work far more than full-time, and so trying to figure out what a part-time pastor would look like here would be very difficult. And the other reason is that you as a congregation, you as the members of this church, are going to need to make some pretty tough decisions about your future as a church. You'll have to do that as individuals and families, but just as importantly, you'll have to do that as a congregation. And I don't think that I'm the right person to help lead you through that process. As you may have picked up on in the scripture reading this morning that was read by Al, over 500 years before Jesus' birth, the Jews were permitted, after having lived in exile, some for 50 years, some for 70 years, were permitted to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the city and, most importantly, to rebuild the temple. And it was a time of great celebration for them. And it says that when they had laid the foundation of the temple, the first thing they did was to throw a celebration. In some ways, I hope that what God has done through me and my family here over the last 5 years, I hope it's laid a foundation for whatever comes next in the life of this church. But it says also that in the midst of all the celebrating and the praise, there was also a lot of weeping. You see, there were some who remembered the old temple that King Solomon had built. And even though the foundation of the new temple was built to the same specs, they worried that the new temple wouldn't be as glorious as the old. And in many ways, it wasn't as glorious as the old. And yet, it was that new temple in which Jesus walked. It was in that new temple in which Jesus worshiped. It was in that new temple that Jesus preached. And so this moment that we are in right now is indeed a bittersweet time. It's a time of remembering what has been, not just in the last 5 years, but over the last 60-plus years that Rockland Community Church has existed. It's a time of remembering the friendships that have been built. And it's also a time of mourning that which will be no longer. But it also should be a time of great expectation, a time of great hope for what God may do in and through each of you, in and through this church. For just as that new temple, that second temple, went on to be the place that Jesus walked, this too will continue to be a church in which Jesus will seek to walk, in which the Holy Spirit will seek to abide. And so I encourage you not to look at this as a defeat or a failure. I'm doing my best to try to not do that. It's not easy. There are days that are harder than others. And I know a number of you have noted that I've looked a little tired recently. Parts because I haven't been sleeping as well, thinking about a lot of this and other things. We will be staying in the area. So this isn't goodbye. We will be here. I will be looking for work. Lori feels it's very important for us to at least let Caitlin finish high school here. And so Jonathan's already clamoring that if we're going to let her finish high school here, we'd better let him finish high school here. You know how that whole fairness thing goes with kids. So at the very least, we'll be here through June 2014 when Caitlin graduates, June 2016 when Jonathan graduates. That is if I can find meaningful work to help feed my family. So I would ask for your prayers to that end. I've started looking, and we'll see what God has in store. We agreed on Friday night that my last day as your pastor will be December 31st. So that's coming up fairly quickly. And I'm hoping that I'll have the opportunity to come back and visit from time to time. It probably wouldn't be appropriate for us to be here every week following December 31st, but maybe after a couple of months, maybe I'll get a chance to come back and worship with you, maybe even get to preach again. I'm not running out and looking for a new pastoral job. There are 60-some churches in Warren County. Many of them, like us, are very small and struggling financially and in terms of the number of people that attend. I have been asked if I'd be willing to consider planting another church in our area. And for the moment, I don't think that's what God is calling me to do. But who knows what God will call me, will call my family to do in the future. So this morning, as hard as this is, I am very thankful for the time that we've had together, for the time that remains. I'm hopeful that we can continue our friendships. I'm hopeful that though those friendships will change, I'm hopeful that they will actually grow. I'm not going to take the approach of the interim pastor who preceded me, who basically said that if you run into me in the grocery store, we can talk about the Redskins or the weather. I really don't like talking about the weather a whole lot, and I know nothing about the Redskins. I'm here. If there's ever anything I can do to help, please call. When I hear of your community dinners, I'm hoping to come join you. That's still deemed appropriate. I don't want to say goodbye. I'll be saying goodbye as your pastor. Some of you, for a time, until you find a new pastor, may consider me still to be your pastor, and that's okay with me. It's an honor and a privilege. If you have prayer needs, you want somebody to talk to, please feel free to call, and I will do my best to do that. As a result of these changes, we're going to end the three-part service next week. So next week will be our last three-part service. Paul will be with us, and we'll celebrate the fact that we were able to have that three-part service for over 2 years, and that for many of us it was very meaningful, and that it did draw some people who were looking for something a little different to our midst. And so we will close that down next week. Beginning on December 2nd with Advent, we will return to Sunday school at 10 o'clock and our worship service at 11. And you'll see after next Sunday, I'll take the vellum signs off the sign out front, and so our old service times will appear. So I'll give you extra half hour or so to get ready in the morning. Not related to this, but concurrent with this, as we did last year, we will not have communion during Advent except for on Christmas Eve. So I'll just point that out right now. I'm going to ask Don to come up in just a couple of minutes. One of the things I'm thankful for is that I am leaving on good terms, and I'm in our meeting with the ministerial review team on Friday night. I'd say I was given the most constructive, positive review I've ever received, and so that was very encouraging, even though we had been in discussions about this for several months. Again, as I said earlier, I know there are mistakes I've made. I know there are things I could have done differently, maybe should have done differently, or that you wish I did differently. But I want to believe that overall I have served you well as your pastor. And I pray that someday I will have the opportunity to serve another congregation as wonderful as you, as their pastor. That would be a deep, deep honor. I'm going to let Don come up because I'm about to fall apart.